All right, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to try and picture a scene of just utter underestimation. It's the late 19th century. The French military, which, remember, is one of the absolute dominant global forces at this time, is gearing up for a conflict in West Africa. And when they hear about the forces arrayed against them, the French soldiers actually laughed. Seriously. To them, the prospect of facing an army made up entirely of women was just completely absurd. But as we're about to see, that laughter absolutely did not last long once they hit the battlefield.
So how exactly could an army of women stop a European empire? That's the huge central question we're unpacking today, and it really highlights the sheer historical improbability of the clash we're about to break down. I mean, we're talking about a completely different paradigm of warfare colliding head-on with modern industrial-age military might. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look closely at what the French were bringing to the fight and what the Kingdom of Dahomey was using to defend itself.
The contrast between the two sides was honestly terrifying. You have the French arsenal boasting repeating rifles, heavy artillery, machine guns, basically the absolute peak of industrial weaponry at the time. And to counter this, the Kingdom of Dahomey had women. But hold on, not just women. These were warriors relentlessly trained from early childhood. We're talking about women who conditioned their bodies to scale physical walls covered in thorny acacia. Women who would march barefoot for miles through incredibly dense forests. Women who swore a sacred oath to literally never retreat from the enemy. So when the French soldiers finally met these highly conditioned, fiercely dedicated fighters in actual combat, well, the laughter vanished. The sheer intensity of the Dahomean women completely shattered French expectations.
Part 1. A Kingdom Built for War. To get the full picture, we're looking at a timeline that spans centuries. The Kingdom of Dahomey emerged back in the 17th century and steadily evolved over time. By the 18th and 19th centuries, this unique force of women, the Agojie, had become incredibly elite fighters. And this sets us on a direct collision course with the late 19th century, right during the European scramble for Africa, which culminates in 1894 when France officially conquers Dahomey. Keep this timeline in the back of your head. It's basically the backbone of our explainer today. Well, to really understand where these extraordinary women came from, we need to look at how this kingdom actually operated day to day. Emerging in the 17th century in what's now southern Benin, Dahomey was, well, it was very different from a lot of its neighboring kingdoms. They built a highly centralized state, and their entire focus was squarely on a strong military. Military service wasn't just some duty you fulfilled every now and then, it was the absolute core of the kingdom's identity and its whole strategy for expansion. The kings of Dahomey aggressively expanded their territory through constant warfare, capturing strategic towns and taking firm control of super important trade routes. Basically, war was the engine of this state.
And right within this massive military machine existed a very specific, totally remarkable core, the Agojie. Now, historians do debate their exact origins. Some oral traditions say they started out as royal elephant hunters, while others argue they began as palace guards who just slowly adopted military roles over time. But whatever their beginnings were, the reality of their existence on the battlefield is completely undeniable. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Agojie had solidified into a fierce, elite military corps dedicated entirely to serving the king of Dahomey.
Moving on to Part 2. Forging Elite Warriors. Okay, so how did they actually train? The transformation process was, in a word, brutal. It fundamentally changed a woman's life. Step 1 was all about grueling endurance drills and constant weapons practice to build up extreme resilience, and European observers explicitly documented this, by the way. Step 2, and this is incredibly vivid, involved recruits literally climbing over physical barriers made of thorny acacia branches just to test their pain tolerance. Step 3 was highly realistic, intensely physical combat training. But all of this physical conditioning led to Step 4, which was the most important element of the whole shebang: swearing absolute, unwavering loyalty to the monarch. Discipline was severe. Loyalty to the king came before absolutely everything else. These women even lived directly within the royal compound, holding a highly unique and elevated social position within Dahomey. And I want to be super clear here. The Agojie were not ceremonial guards. They weren't just there to look intimidating for visiting diplomats. They were active, frontline soldiers. They were built for real war. They marched barefoot through dense forests, they trained relentlessly every single day, and they were deployed to fight, win, and die for the expansion and defense of Dahomey.
Which brings us to Part 3, the Franco-Dahomean Wars.
This is the classic unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. You have European powers frantically racing to colonize Africa, with France specifically zeroing in on wanting total control of Dahomey. On the other side, you've got King Behenzin of Dahomey, who flatly refused to surrender his kingdom to any foreign power. This obviously set the stage for a massive conflict, and when the Franco-Dahomeyan Wars actually broke out, the Agojie didn't hide behind the walls. They marched right beside the kingdom's male soldiers, launching these determined, highly aggressive assaults time and time again.
And you know what's fascinating? The disciplined, determined assaults of the Agojie actually forced a profound respect from their enemies. Some European officers later wrote with deep admiration about the discipline and courage of the Dahomeyan women. This is incredibly telling, right? French reports from the battlefield frequently paused just to praise the bravery of these fighters, even as those exact same reports were noting the devastating effectiveness of the modern French weapons being used against them. But of course, the reality of the battlefield was incredibly stark. The Agojie fought fiercely, and they absolutely did inflict casualties on the French forces. But their incredible bravery, their resilience, and a literal lifetime of training were ultimately decimated by modern artillery and repeating rifles. Courage alone, no matter how immense or how disciplined, simply could not overcome industrial-age weaponry. It's a really somber historical reality of this massive technological mismatch.
Let's look at Part 4, the enduring legacy. 1894. Definitely make a mental note of this critical year. This was the year France officially conquered Dahomey. King Behenzin was forced into exile, and the Agojie Corps, this centuries-old elite fighting force, was officially disbanded under French colonial rule. So, as an active military unit, their story ends right here.
But, their legacy just refused to fade away. Today, the Agojie remain these incredibly powerful symbols of determination and elite military discipline. More than that, they really highlight the highly complex, structured history of pre-colonial West Africa, a region that had its own deep political and military intricacies. Obviously, we know they inspire modern artists, historians, and big blockbuster filmmakers today. But it's absolutely vital to remember that while pop culture often simplifies or kind of romanticizes their story to fit an easy narrative, the historical reality is a much more profound testament. The real history of the Agojie is so much richer and vastly more nuanced than any movie could ever portray.
Now, we do have to acknowledge the hard historical truth here, neutrally and firmly. The Agojie did not stop colonialism. History often remembers the empires that won, and in this specific case, the Kingdom of Dahomey fell to the French. But I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Is courage measured by victory alone? The Agojie didn't win the Franco-Dahomeyan Wars. But sometimes I think history needs to remember the people who stood up against empires, regardless of the ultimate outcome. Long after the Kingdom of Dahomey fell, the sheer willpower and discipline of the women who defended it remained completely unforgettable. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive gave you a much clearer picture of who these incredible warriors actually were.